Alrighty, good evening. KQ4UNQ, Josh here. I'm here with
K4CWH, Chad Howard.
with Henry County 911, and we're going to do a quick interview. So I guess our first question here is, what got you into radio?
Believe it or not, CB. I was a pizza delivery boy for Domino's Pizza, and I had a bunch of friends, and we had CB radios. And one of the gentlemen who was one of the older gentlemen at Domino's Pizza was into single sideband. He had single sideband CBs. So he introduced me to single sideband CB, which was FM, and it was further reaching, and you didn't have all the static and all the people talking over each other. So I got into that, and a bunch of us bought single sideband radios, and I found a bigger community in Kentucky and Tennessee to talk to. And then I started talking to friends of mine who were then become ham radio operators. So January the 15th, I believe it was, of 1992, I took my novice test, which back then you had to take 5 word a minute Morse code, and got my novice ticket. And then in February of the next month, around the same date, I got my what was called technician's license. Now it's called Tech Plus, I think is what they call it now. But I got a full-blown technician's license, and my original call sign was KD4IZX. And you know how people like to do rhyming names for their call sign. K4KLX was King Lincoln X-ray, and then Kilo Lima X-ray, and I was IZX. Just you never could come up with a good IZX, and the only one buddy of mine who's dead now came up with it was Indigenous Zebra X-rays. So I got rid of, when I was able to get the vanity call, I got K4CWH, which is my initials, K4CWH.
Alrighty. Why did you choose to work for Henry County 911?
I originally worked as a dispatcher starting in May of 1997. I worked as a 911 dispatcher. That's how I got hired by the police department, was a 911 communicator. And I did that for just a little over 11 years. And I decided to take a job in the private sector doing website design. I was a programmer, computer programmer, and different things. So I took a job that I thought was going to be more money, and didn't turn out that way. But then in 2015, well, let me go back. When I'd quit the police department, the man you met, Mark Archer, my boss, he had told me, one of these days we're going to need an IT person. I'll keep you in mind. And then in 2015, early of 2015, I think February, he came to me and said, "We're probably going to be hiring for an IT person. You need to put your resume in and everything." And so I started part-time doing work up here, still working at the other job, but helping them with the map, remapping the map. And the part-time job then led into the full-time job. It's really funny because in the 911 world in the state of Tennessee, 911 districts are municipalities to themselves. So like how Henry County is a municipality and Paris, Tennessee is a municipality, the 911 districts are also their own municipality. So they're not governed by the city of Paris or the Henry County. The only thing that the county touches of us is the county mayor appoints the board members to the board. But other than that, they don't touch our budgets, and those things are separated by Tennessee state law. That's the way it's set up. So when I tell people about it, the easiest analogy I can think of is you have to think of 911 kind of like the Vatican. The Vatican is a sovereign municipality nation, but it's in the middle of Rome and it's in the middle of Italy. But they don't answer to Italy or Rome. And 911, to a certain degree, is the same way. Although we get along with our other municipalities quite well. We work hand in hand with them every day. So unlike the Vatican in that token, we actually work hand in hand with those entities. But the 911 system, by and large, is it being its own entity, falls under rules and regulations that we have to follow that others don't. Mm-hmm. So going back to your initial part of this question, oh wow. Yeah, it was something I really enjoyed doing. Was I was in 911, and when we moved up. But the point I'm making is that in the 911 community, unless you get into larger districts, so like even Jackson, I don't know if Jackson does. Clarksville, I don't think does, or they may, but they may fall under a city person. But anyway, the IT person in the 911 district is usually the supervisor or the dispatch director, or not dispatch director, but the 911 district director, and they handle all the IT part of it. So my job when I got hired was kind of this white unicorn that nobody could classify, because technically I mapped, I did IT work, I did radio work, so I was kind of one of these catch-alls. And there's really nobody in any other district that does what I do. You know, there's people that work in mapping, but they don't work in IT and radio, or they work with the radio system, but they don't work in mapping and IT, and I do all three. So I was kind of this white elephant that nobody ever seen before, and they're like, how do we classify him? But it's become kind of, as now one has grown, it's become more and more apparent to a lot of districts that IT is especially with cybersecurity, has really moved forward. In fact, funny story, Henry County 911 was the very first 911 center in the entire nation to be hit by ransomware in 2016. I was actually at a cybersecurity conference in San Diego, and we got hit with a ransomware the morning of June 16th, and mitigated that incident in 36 hours. I mean, we learned a lot of lessons, but you never want to be the first in anything. But if you put in NBC Nightly News, Google NBC Nightly News in my name,
yeah.
it is what it is. But cybersecurity has become so much more of a necessity in our industry, even in the radio part of the industry, because now radios are no longer just the analog repeaters that are sitting out there. I mean, all of our radio system is completely IP based and digital, and so we have to really robustly keep those systems as protected as possible.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty. What education and/or training is needed to get a position such as yours?
Well, that's funny. To be an IT person, you really need to have some sort of training. The vocational schools offer a decent training in what you would basically need. It's kind of funny because I tell people all the time, they look at me and they think that I'm this big super nerd that knows everything about computers in the world. My job as the IT manager is not to know every little nuance of every little circuit of every little thing that goes on, because I have vendors who do that. Like I've got a vendor that managed my network security, and they manage the networks themselves, how all the switches are hooked up, how the firewall's hooked up. Now I know how to get in those systems, look around and fix things, but when it comes to the in-depth things about routing and tables and all that stuff, I rely on that guy to take care of those things. Consequently, the radio project, same way. I didn't build the radio system. We have a radio vendor that has an engineer who designed the system, put it all up. I maintain it and know how to operate it. But it's really, if there's a problem, I have to call him and say, okay, it's doing this. What's it doing? My job is to know what the problem is and to articulate that problem as best to those people as possible so that we get the fix remedied. Too many times, especially in the 911 world and really in any other IT business, you'll have people call your IT person on the phone and say, well, it ain't working. Well, what's it not working? What's it doing? Well, it just ain't working. Well, it ain't working is lots of different things. My own father, I love my dad to death, but he didn't care anything about IT stuff growing up. I've been doing this since September 22nd, 1982 at 5:30 when I got my first computer when I was 12. I started programming immediately. So that was the beginning of my career. I've had no formal training in IT and all this. I literally learned it as I've gone. And so I'm lucky in that respect. I don't hold a degree in computer science or even a degree at all. But I had that on-job training, completely immersing myself in that field growing up and learning. So it's always been a learning experience. But too many times you have people that just do well, it ain't working. My dad, like I said, he'll call me on the phone and say, well, my computer's doing this. And he'll start describing the screen to me. I'm like, Dad, wait, stop. I've got to look at it, see what it's doing. Because what you're describing to me could be 5 different reasons why it's doing it. And he doesn't grasp that he's telling me a problem, and he thinks it should be just this one linear problem that I should be able to just go, oh yeah, just do this. And sometimes that's the case, but 9 times out of 10, it's not the case. And radios is no different, especially when you get into these digital radios. These are computers. They're not a radio anymore. They're not in the sense of push a button, talk over a frequency that's then being re-repeated by a computer or by a repeater. These are sending computer packets of data. The computer then decrypts it or descrambles it at their source and then puts it back together, sends it out as an audio signal, and then does it the opposite way back. So, when an analog repeater is going bad, it's one of 2 things. It's either the PA or it's the finals. In a digital repeater, it's just never that simple. So I immerse myself in learning these things. But if there was somebody who was trying to learn to do these things, if you're going into network engineering, you definitely need to get your A+ and your CSA and all that stuff. If you're going into firewalls, you definitely want the CSA and the CISM stuff. If you're going into radios, obviously radio engineering, those kind of things. Military offers those, in fact, the guy that's a radio vendor for us, he came out of the Army as a radio signal corpsman, and he worked on systems he can't even tell me about over in South Korea, Mm-hmm. So he gained that knowledge. The pursuit of the knowledge in these specific aspects or fields, if you will, you need to be really focused on absorbing as much as possible, putting your efforts into those things, and then follow that trajectory till you get to the point where now it becomes, I've got to go for higher education. But start before that. Start researching the things and learning about the things beforehand. YouTube is a great source of learning about DMR radio. What is DMR? Why is DMR different from analog? And then you start moving on forward. Ham radio operators, same thing. Mm-hmm. Basically a ham radio, which if people who are not hams don't know, is a very low engineering entry. You're learning about the engineering of radio communications. So when you start out as a novice, you learn the very basics. Then you go to technician, you're learning more about propagations and frequencies and how to build antennas. And then you go to the extra class, and now you're learning how to build amplifiers and how electric circuits work and how to build antennas that are high class. And, so it's a step of progression of learning, not just achieving a license. It's you start the first pace, you move up to the second, which is more advanced, and then finally the extra class, which is the most advanced. You're now delving into physics and engineering and all these things. So, I just got my general ticket I got a general ticket in 2022 or 2023, I can't remember which, and I've had a technician since 92. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't even go to the general class, so.
So I guess that answers the question if you were a licensed amateur radio operator.
I am a licensed amateur radio operator, yes. I've had many radios. My first contact I ever had, which was kind of funny, I had what's called a Yaesu FT101EE, which was a big, humongous ham rig. It was tubes. You had to turn it on and let it warm up because it was not ready to go. Mm. You let it warm up for 10, 15 minutes before you even talked on it. And then you had to tune it. You had to tune the tubes. But my first contact was with a Coast Guard cutter. It was in January of '92. He was a Coast Guard cutter in the Aleutian Islands north of the Bering Sea. So he was north of Russia in the open water. And all Coast Guard vessels carried ham radio and ham radio operators on them at the time for communications. If their communications failed, they were using high frequency. And he just struck up a conversation with me one night. We were talking on 10 meters. And all of a sudden, he'd start fading out. And I never could, he'd be getting worse and worse. And he'd say, hang on one second. And then he'd come back and he'd say, okay, we can talk a little longer. And so we'd talk and he'd start fading out again. And he'd say, hang on just a second. And then finally, he'd come back and say, okay, that's 3,000 watts. They don't have anything that big. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what do you mean 3,000 watts? He said, the Russians are trying to jam us. I just turned up my amplifier to 3,000 watts. They ain't anything that big. So, mm-hmm. I mean, this guy's on a ship putting out 3,000 watts. And later on, I got a picture from that gentleman, and the antenna was strung between the masts. It was just a simple wire. And when he would key up, he was keying up so much wattage that the wire was glowing blue, and the atmosphere around it, because Europe and where they have the northern lights, when he would key up, it would glow this blue glow around the antenna. It was just the weirdest, strangest thing you'd ever seen.
Alrighty. So, is there a local ARES, which is an amateur radio emergency service for those who do not know, in Henry County? If so, how can someone get involved?
So currently there is not. There was at one time an ARES in Henry County, and there was some kind of a blow up at the state level with ARES. I don't know what it was. I have no information about it. The closest thing we have to an ARES right now is being run by a gentleman named Mitch Gallimore and a gentleman named Barry Sandifer. And I don't remember their call signs off the top of my head, but those two gentlemen, you can look them up on ARRL, and those two gentlemen could put you into the correct way of getting a hold of somebody if you were interested in ARES. Of course, as everything else is, Mars is gone. The Mars and the used to be Mars, and Civil Air Patrol had to move off of ham radio and go to their radio system after 9/11. We still like to try to have ham radio operators come up here during tornado season and we have a communications room in the other room in there. We actually have a ham station. I've got an HF and a 2-meter 440 rig in there. And I would love to get ham radio operators to come up and man that station on nights where we have tornado warnings, so that people out in the field are reporting back to here, and we're getting that report to the National Weather Service. I've had, in the last 5 years, I've had one ham radio operator, no, two. I had a husband and wife and then another guy who actually manned that room. Most people want to stay home. They don't want to come up here. So 9 times out of 10, I wind up manning it along with trying to run everything else, because inevitably I'm in the communications room trying to run BPU, the highway department, trying to do those communications to take that off of 911. Because 911 is inundated with phone calls of trees down and lines down and damage and people hurt and all that. So I try to take that load off of them by doing the menial stuff. Right, yeah. And so, but if we had a ham radio operator who could sit in there too and talk to the people out in the field who are taking storm reports, then we could feed that back, because we have a live link to the National Weather Service here, so we could type that data in. But alas, I can't get people to come. So,
well, hopefully with this video we can get some people.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I mean, you can call Ron Watkins at the local EMA office, and I'll get you that phone number here in a second. But you can call Ron and say, I want to volunteer on the nights when we have tornadoes. I want to come up and help. And then, so that phone number for Ron is 731-644-2678. That's the emergency management office. And, just tell them, say, hey, look, I'm a ham radio operator, and we're going to have storms coming. I'd like to come and man the station. The problem is that, and you well know, the weather is finicky, fickle. You may sit up here for 4 hours, not a warning, nothing. And then they'll say, well, it's not going to be as bad as it looks like it's going to be. And then we activate the EOC, and it is just craziness the whole night, because storms pop up, and all of a sudden we got lines and choo-choo training, tornadoes. And so you just never know. And by and large, a lot of people would come up here and sit, and they would feel like, well, it was just a waste of my time. I could have been home. You got to look at it for the greater good of the community. That you're doing this not for the fact of being bored. You're doing it for the fact that, you're providing a service to the people of Henry County they would not otherwise have, because the storm report from the ham radio operator out there in the field who comes back into here eventually gets to the public when we issue warnings, or not issue warnings, but when we put out the sirens and try to issue things back to the National Weather Service. So it's all a trickle down to the National Weather Service. So you can't look at it like, well, I sat here all night but didn't do nothing. I ain't coming back. That happens. Yeah. I sit up here also sometimes, and we never have a storm. The National Weather Service, it's going to be crazy tonight, enhanced level 3, and the storms go either north of us or south of us. And we, I can't tell you how many times.
Nothing.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times that's happened. So, you know.
Alrighty. So getting into DMR, how does the DMR Tier 3 system work here in Henry County?
So the DMR Tier 3 system here in Henry County is a simulcasted DMR system. When we originally were looking at this project, we basically had so many repeaters in the county that everybody couldn't talk to each other. We had so many people that had different frequencies, and other than 911 who had like 15 radios in there and were talking to everybody else couldn't talk to each other. Mm-hmm. So we brought everybody in that were head of the departments, every department in Henry County, we brought them into the training room, sat them down and said, look, here's what we have. We showed them the pictures of our old repeater systems. No one can talk to each other. Mm-hmm. And that's not acceptable. We need to have something where we can all communicate together on one system. And everybody agreed. The sheriff, the police chief, everybody was in agreement, which, believe it or not, I know it's hard to believe, but most counties, the sheriff and the police chief can't get along with each other. Mm-hmm. It blows my mind that they won't work with each other. Yeah. But luckily Henry County is that white elephant, mm-hmm. And everybody was like, yes, we need to do this, we need to do this. So that began the process of looking into doing this. Now, of course, how to pay for it. This DMR Tier 3 system was $1.5 million. We didn't have $1.5 million to spend on a radio system. 911 can't spend that kind of money on it because our laws, TCA codes, do not allow us to spend that kind of money on that. We can contribute money to the project if someone else's project, like if it was the county's, but we can't do that. We can't spend that kind of money. I've got 2 computers that are at $250,000 a piece by themselves. Yeah. And by federal law, if they die, I've got to have a new one in place in 6 hours. Mm-hmm. So I got to keep money in reserve just for those computers. So we looked at going into grants. Of course, when you look at grants in the federal structure, grants require you to do P25 because everybody's drinking the P25 Kool-Aid. And I get it. Look, I get P25. I really do. But we're talking about 5 years ago. This is a whole different deal with P25 back then. Mm-hmm. Back then, the state had the big P25 system, and they were only allowing, at that time, first responders on the system. Sheriff, police, fire. That was it. No EMS. They didn't allow anybody else outside those organizations on it now. Now they're changing their rules to some degree and things, and they're building their system out bigger. But at the time, that just didn't fit the needs of what we were wanting. We wanted to have everybody have the ability to talk. Mm. The school systems, the utility departments, the EMS, the fire, everybody, same system. So we started looking at grant structures, and the only thing we could come up with was community development block grants, which are typically used to put in water lines and sewer lines, everything. But it just so happened that we caught those grants on off years when the water projects and stuff had already been done. So we were able to utilize those CDBG block grants, first from the county and then from the city, to offset the cost of the majority of the system, which wound up being about $880,000 in grants over a 2-year period. And then 911 paid a percentage, the county of Henry paid a percentage, and the city of Paris paid a percentage to build the system and pay for radios. So that $1.5 million is not just the repeaters, it's all buying the radios as well for all the first responders. Now, the school system, the utility departments, they all had to buy all their own radios. Mm-hmm. Those didn't fall under the grant because the grant only covered the first responders, and so they had to buy their own. But once they knew the infrastructure was coming, well, it was no brainer. Mm-hmm. So we had to run about 25 miles, I think, total of fiber optic network for the BPU. Mm-hmm. And the BPU was gracious enough to donate the labor, provided we bought the hard line to do it. So part of that grant money paid for getting those fiber lines and having the BPU run those fiber lines, because in the end of the day, the BPU is going to benefit from this system. They're going to be on it too. Mm. So by running the fiber to all those places, we then are all benefiting from it. It helps them, helps us. So again, the community came together
Coexisting.
and we coexist in the same system. When that fiber goes down, the BPU radios go down. So we got to get it back up. So they're very quick to try to get that back online because it benefits them as well. So coming up with the money was the biggest hurdle. Then we had to say, okay, now what is going to be the best system? So we looked at Turbo. We looked at NextEdge. We looked at all these systems. We traveled and visited many different agencies. The Kenwood folks took us to Hopkinsville to see their NextEdge system. One set of folks took us down to Memphis to see a Turbo system. And I knew enough about radios in the ham radio world, and I'd been watching DMR progress, and the DMR open standard really, to me, made more sense. Because then that way, we're not hamstringing anybody to a certain radio. Okay? For instance, right here, these are all Motorola radios. Every one of them. There's an XBR 7550. There's an R7. Here's the more advanced Android-based Ion. And then you have the Kenwood. So any one of these radios can work on this system.
Yeah.
You can run Tates. You can run Hyteras. You can run Sephoras. You can run any radio that can legally do DMR Tier 3 can be put on our system. All I got to do is assign it an ID number because every radio has a different ID number. But once I assign that ID number, then you can go have it programmed and it works on the system. Now, all the Motorola's I program in-house. We have a over-the-air programming software. So all 990 radios that are Motorola based, the fire departments, the police departments, the EMS, the school systems, the utilities, all those radios, I manage and maintain them in here. We have some agencies who are on the Kenwoods. For instance, we partnered with Callaway County, Kentucky, Murray, Kentucky. Murray was having trouble being able to cover the southern part of Callaway County. They didn't have repeaters in that area. So we said, hey, we got repeaters at Purrier and at the lake on Rabbit Creek Road. All you got to do is come onto our system, and then we cover your county. So we put repeaters in our buildings at those two locations, ran internet to those so they can connect to them by IP connected networks, and then we fiber optim between the two sites through our fiber, and we're basically covering the southern portion of Callaway County. By doing so, we could make a link between Callaway County and us. So now, any of us in Henry County can talk to anybody in Callaway County, and Callaway County can talk to us. So if we have a fire on the line, the Callaway County Fire can just turn right over to our frequency, and we can turn to theirs. And it works as a great partnership. It's funny that in a lot, like I said, in a lot of counties, the sheriff and police chief can't even get along. But yet here are two different states, completely different ideological governments who have come together and said, look, we've got a problem, we got a fix, let's work together. And we did. So we have this mutual agreement with Callaway County, and everybody that's on the system pays a small fee. It's not necessarily a radio fee, but it's based upon the amount of radios you have. The fee that we charge each entity to be on the system to pay for, it pays for the electricity used at the tower sites every month, and it puts a little bit of extra money into a fund that funds the maintenance of the system. The money was designed so that radios are not bought with that money, but maintaining the system does. When we started looking at this system and these other systems, the first thing I noticed about every system that had gone belly up was it fell down on maintenance. They put this great system in, it was super, but then nobody thought we need to save money when antennas break or lightning strikes, and we got to save money to maintain these things. And they weren't doing that. So each player in the game puts money into a pot that's maintained by the county to pay for electricity at the sites and for maintenance costs that we have. And every year that money is put in there and it's saved. But that also means that everybody who puts money in has a seat at the table. When we make a decision about what we're going to do with the system, everybody's involved in it. So we're fixing to implement an automatic vehicle location system. So we'll be able to see on a map in 911 where every police car is, every sheriff's car, but the BPU can see where all their trucks are. The school system can see where all their buses are. So we had everybody in a virtual meeting discuss that, and everybody was in agreement we should do it. So we're fixing to launch this $250,000 AVL system that's going to give us the ability to know where every police officer and every police car and every ambulance and every fire truck. You kind of say, well, why do you need to know that? Well, if somebody's going to a fire in Como, okay, and we need extra fire support and they're coming from Puryear, the people in Puryear don't necessarily know where things are in Como, right? But if we can see where the fire truck is on a map, then we can say, okay, turn left, turn right, go down this road. We can direct them in. So by doing that, that gives us that ability. Plus we get people who say, oh, this police car drove by me at 85 miles an hour that night and didn't even have his license siren on. Well, the sheriff can pull up the screen and look at the history of that car and where it was going, pulls it up, and it's doing 65 mile an hour down 79 south. Ma'am?
I got it right here.
I got it right here. He's doing 65 mile an hour at the exact moment you said he passed you. So, again, you know?
Yeah.
So a lot of people look at AVL as this big brother watching you, but in reality, it can also save you, you know? But those are the things. It's a matter of getting the community to understand what is best practice. Now, once we had decided that DMR Tier 3 was the way we wanted to go, then it was a matter of putting out the bid. We had to put out an RFP bid, and we had Motorola respond. Well, not Motorola. A Motorola vendor responded with a DMR Tier 3 solution. We had another vendor who responded with a UHF solution, which was the Tate system. We had Kenwood come back. They were coming back with a Next Edge system, which was way overpriced. It was the first phase was the total price of the entire project. And then we had another company come back with another bid from what was called Hytera. And in the end of the day, the bid was granted to the Motorola folks because they came in under bid and provided the service. So the RFP went out, everybody opened the RFP, and at the end of the day, the Motorola company won it. Now, we're not using Motorola turbo radios, repeaters. We're using what's called Leonardo's. Leonardo is a company out of Italy, and they're huge. They're big into aerospace and stuff like that, and they build their own repeater. And it's an open Tier 3 standard because it's mainly used in Europe and Asia. It's where of course, DMR Tier 3 is huge over there, Tetra and DMR Tier 3. So, to my knowledge, we are the second DMR Tier 3 public safety system in the entire nation. The first one was Carroll County, and they did 800. We did UHF, so we're the first UHF DMR Tier 3 system that I know of in the United States. Now, that's not to say we are the only one. I don't know, but I haven't been told there are others. Now, the system, you asked about how good it works. There were challenges in the beginning. There's always, no system ever works out of the box 100%. There was a lot of settings we had to go through. There was a lot of growing pains. There was one night when the whole system went down, which is a funny story. And if you have time, I'll tell you the funny story because it was really hilarious. But by and large now, with the exception of encryption, it works really good. Encryption sometimes garbles on the radio quite a bit. When you add an extra layer of encryption to any communications, you're going to have garbling. And we just got through running a test where we took the encryption off for a week and ran it without encryption and then put the encryption back on. And we had significantly less errors with it unencrypted than we did encrypted. The funny story was New Year's Eve 2 years ago. Literally 2 years ago, New Year's Eve. The entire radio system, all 6 repeater sites, 24 repeaters, went down completely at 6 o'clock in the evening. So I laid down to take a nap because it's New Year's Eve and to 3 o'clock in the evening, between 3 and 4, I laid down. 6 o'clock, my phone's blowing up. I mean, completely blowing up. The whole system is down. So I hurry into town, go to the first repair site. The repeaters are just cycling, power cycling, over and over and over at every site. They're doing the same thing. So I've got the vendor on the phone. I'm like, what's going on here? You know. Finally, at 1:30 in the morning, the decision was made after we never got anything working right. We went back to the old analog systems for a little while. The decision was made, let's go to every tower site and we're just going to flip the power off and back on at the same time. Mm-hmm. You go there, you go there, you go there. So I'm heading to Cottage Grove, and I'm on the phone with the vendor, and I'm also on the phone with the engineer in Kansas for Leonardo, and I'm on the phone with the lead engineer in Italy, where these things are made. Mm-hmm. So he's during daytime in Italy. It's already New Year's Day, and it's, you know, like I think it was 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the afternoon in Italy. And as I'm driving to Cottage Grove, he says, "Oh my God!" And I'm like, "What?" So I pull over at Walker Cemetery on 69 North. I'm sitting in the cemetery. He says, "Hang on a second, let me call you right back." Okay, so we stay on the phone. The guy from Italy gets off. 10 minutes later, he calls back and says, "Okay, here's the fix." Mm-hmm. What's the fix? He said, "Okay, go to every tower site, unscrew the GPS antenna puck from the system, because all these are synchronized by GPS. Mm-hmm. Pull this GPS puck out of the radio system." Okay, so we did that. All the repeaters came up, started working again. Mm-hmm. I said, "Okay, now wait a minute. What gives here?" He says, "Okay, well, you remember when we were having problems with the repeaters and we gave you a new firmware upgrade?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, the Air Force decided to do an upgrade of the GPS satellites in outer space at 6 o'clock in the evening on New Year's Eve. When they did that upgrade, the current firmware version you're running on your repeaters is not compatible with that." Mm-hmm. I said, "So you're telling me the Air Force did an update of the GPS satellites and shut down my system?" He said, "Yeah, it shut down systems in Japan, Italy, France, Germany, and the UK." He said, "That's why I found out about it, because I got a phone call from all these people saying our repeaters are down." Mm-hmm. And they were doing exactly the same thing yours were doing. Mm-hmm. So I got on the phone with my military contact, and he told me what was going on. Then I knew to unplug the GPS. Yeah. So once we unplugged the GPS, everything came up. So now we're back up. So what happened was the engineer in Kansas then logged in to each repeater one at a time, rolled back the firmware version that we were on to a version that would work with the GPS upgrade. Then we screwed the GPS pucks back in, and everything was back up and running. Mm-hmm. But it was a long night.
A long night.
Long night. So now we have got a secondary repeater system, mm-hmm. which is a DMR Tier 2 system. Mm-hmm. So it only has 2 channels. But we figure in a disaster, 2 channels is better than no channels. Right. And it's still countywide on the same repeaters. But if the fiber were to get cut, that repeater site can go into single site mode. Mm-hmm. As long as it's connected by fiber, it's still up and running. Mm-hmm. But we built a microwave backhaul from this building to Grove Hill to the master site, and then we got a microwave to Cottage Grove right now currently, and we're going to eventually build a microwave ring as a backup to the fiber. Right now everything's fiber. Mm-hmm. So we're good. It's fiber optic networks is always faster than microwave. It's not susceptible to weather. But we've now built in backup repeaters at these sites that will give us a law channel and a fire EMS channel in the event of a big disaster. Mm-hmm. Obviously right now that wouldn't help BPU, natural gas and everything, but the quicker we can get those systems back up, then everything comes back on. We just can do the major systems at that point.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty. How many digital modes are being used on the Henry system?
When you say digital modes, how do you mean?
NXDM, P25 DMR.
We're not using any of those. It's all DMR Tier 3.
All DMR.
It's all DMR Tier 3. The Henry system is a DMR Tier 3 repeater system solely.
So there's nothing being patched?
Well, now, we are patched to the P25 system of the state. Mm-hmm. I provided a radio, and it's in their tower building on Eastwood Street, and they've created a special channel on their system called Henry, so that the state troopers can monitor the sheriff's department in case of car wrecks. So, and then the troopers can talk directly to 911. And so we've patched that 800 system to this system. That is the only one currently. Callaway County, which is DMR Tier 2, before we were partnering together, we provided them a radio with their console that they could patch the console. So any channel on their console they could patch to us. We were going to do the same thing with Stewart County. But Stewart County says they have a radio that they're going to put in for that purpose. We haven't approached Weakley County and Carroll County yet about it, but that's upcoming. And we built a talk group called KYTN, which is basically just a talk group for PSAP to PSAP. So that we can call Callaway and say, we got a warrant on this person, or we got a car coming into your county that's doing this, So it's just basically a talk channel between the answering points, but it's not for the officers. If the officer needs to talk to Callaway, they can switch over and talk directly to them. So that's always in the back of our mind, is interoperability with other counties. So we want to have that. That's what we're working toward. And with so many different systems out there, P25 is a great system. Do not get me wrong. P25 is a great system. It is just so expensive. This radio is $3,000, right? The equivalent P25 radio is $9,000. So let's say that the FCC said, okay, if you're going to be public safety, from now on, you've got to be P25. Nothing else. It's got to be P25. It's got to be 800 megahertz and P25. You go to a little town like Gleason, Tennessee, and say to them, okay, from now on, you're going to buy a repeater that used to cost $10,000, now costs $40,000, and you're going to provide all 9 of your officers with handhelds that are $9,000 a piece and mobiles that are $9,000 a piece.
Right.
You're going to bankrupt the town.
Yeah.
They can't afford that. There's no way. And the grants that you get do not cover radios. They only cover the infrastructure. These federal grants do not allow you to buy some radios sometimes. They only cover the infrastructure. Or they'll let you buy radios but not cover infrastructure. They don't ever cover all of it. Yeah. There's different grants. The firefighter assistance grant, I think about radios but not the repeaters and all that stuff. It's just so while those radios are great, there's not a funding structure yet that makes it appeasing to smaller agencies. So we looked at it like, okay, well, to give you an example, the state came in with a bid of $3 million. And that was only going to provide us coverage for the sheriff's department, police department, and sheriff and police, and that was all it was going to cover. And we were going to have to build a tower and put it out the lake and give them the tower. And that was still only going to give us about 75% portable coverage for the whole county. We already had 75% portable coverage.
Yeah.
Why would I spend $3 million to get the same thing I got now? It just didn't make any sense.
Right.
I can't officially say we have 100% handheld coverage, but we're real close.
Really close.
We've got maps that I did. I took this radio right here. I took that radio, hooked it to a laptop in my car, turned on the GPS puck, and then I drove the county. And every 10 seconds, this radio keyed up and talked to the repeater. And I drove not every road, but every main road in the county. So I've got a map that shows me going down about every main road in Henry County. And there are 3 spots in Henry County on a handheld where we had no signal. 3 individual spots.
In the entirety of the
county. In the entire county. Everywhere else we had some signal. Near those black spots, we had degraded signal. But you drive 1,000 feet from that point and you're back into good signal. The mobiles were even better.
Yeah.
In fact, we did it based upon a negative 116 dB. So neg 85 is perfect. Neg 116, you don't have the repeater anymore. Okay, so I threshold it to say, give me every instance between 0 and neg 116. If you went over neg 116, show it as null. So I drove around with a car radio doing the same thing, and I didn't have anything less than neg 110 on a mobile anywhere in the county on a short antenna. If we had a longer antenna, it was even better.
Yeah.
So we did research. We didn't just put this up and say, oh, this is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we literally drove the county, audited the system, and then I had a guy from the state come in and audit the actual system, meaning the tower sites and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just we put it up and let it go.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of planning, there was a lot of strategy, there was a lot of engineering, there was a lot of steps that went into this. It took 3 years to build it. But now we have a system that I've been told by the engineers has the same capacity as Metro Nashville Police Department.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we don't have as many radios on them as they do,
Yeah.
but Memphis Light, Gas, and Water does. And Memphis Light, Gas, and Water built the exact same system we did. They came here when they found out we were building this system. They came up here and looked at our system.
Mm-hmm.
They built the same system. Now, they have more sites than we do, but they have the same exact system. And they've got over, I think it's 6,000 or 8,000 radios on that system.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't even get busy signals either.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no busies. I think we have 1,250 radios on this system.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a busy. You know, never.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got like, you understand DMR as far as the repeaters work, right?
Yeah.
That the repeater is got a frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say it's 460-125, and it uses time slots, slot A and slot B. And what that essentially does is it splits that 460-125 into two different frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes it down 6 kcs this way and 6 kcs this way. So instead of 460-125, you're at 460 or 459-875 here, and you're at 462-25 on this side.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes one frequency and splits it into two. So now you have two people that can talk on one repeater at the same time, and nobody talks over each other.
Yeah.
You had 3 repeaters, you now have 6 channels. So with 3 repeaters, you get 6 talk groups. One talk group's got to be your control channel, and the rest of them are, you know, and they just vote. They just, you know, talk, KU4AC, K948, how you doing? Oh, I'm good. How you doing? Fine. How's everything going with you? You as a radio person do not care which repeater you're on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, used to repeaters had a frequency. You were on that repeater, and when that repeater was tied up, you were talking on it, and nobody else could get on it. Now the system manages it, and so you don't really care what frequency you're on at the time. You just care that you can talk to your people.
Yeah.
So the computer system manages where you talk and how they're keyed up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the beauty of a DMR Tier 3 system,
Mm-hmm.
is that the system manages it,
Right.
and everybody has the ability to talk.
Yeah. What mobiles are being used across the county? For example, school buses, law enforcement vehicles, public work vehicles, etc.
Okay, so everybody except for the school buses. The school buses opted to get the little cheaper Motorola radios. They didn't want the ones with the big screens, you know, like
The 5550s.
right, the 5550s. They got the 5350s, which is just has a green 1 through 10 on it, you know, whatever. But we programmed those radios where they can talk to any school, they can talk to 911, they can talk to the bus garage, they can talk to central office, and they can talk to each other when they go out of town. So they have a talk around channel that we own. It's on the Henry system. It's a licensed talk around channel, and they can talk on those channels, and they're digitally encrypted, or not digitally encrypted, but they're digital. And so if a bus goes to Clarksville, 2 or 3 buses, they can just turn over and talk around one, and they can all talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the SRO has the same frequency in his radio.
Mm-hmm.
So he can talk to the buses.
Yeah.
That was very important, was make sure the SRO had communications with the buses, had communication with the school, blah, 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 and down the line.
Yeah.
So we did that to make sure that happened. But everybody else is running 5550s,
Mm-hmm.
E's.
Alrighty. So this is going into radio reference database. On talk group 190 and 191, they are titled as County Interoperable 1 and 2.
Right.
Are these talk groups actually used for interoperability, and if so, what is being patched together?
They are for interoperability. So we have another interop channel called River.
Mm-hmm.
But what those channels are, and those channels lie dormant 90% of the time. But let's say that we had a bus wreck that resulted into a fire, so you got multiple casualties. You're going to start your ICS. You're going to have a scene commander, and he's controlling the fire department, EMS, and everything. So then what we would do is we'd say, okay, IC's been established. Everyone go to interop channel 1.
Mm-hmm.
So now anybody coming to that scene will be using the interop channel 1 so that the IC can utilize that channel.
Mm-hmm.
Then When they get on scene, they'll use talk arounds and the federal frequencies, the UTAC and all that when they get there. But we utilize those channels for any type of multi-agency scenario. So, for instance, the June Jam that they had down at the lake, and the 4th of July celebrations. We utilize the other interop channel called the River. And that channel, that then puts the TWRA, which have our radios. We put the rescue squad, the Buchanan Fire Department, the Paris Lane State Park, the Sheriff's Department. They're all on that channel together, monitoring it together.
Yeah.
Any incident that happens in that scene, they're all on that channel together and can respond without having to be on separate channels and somebody coordinating it. And it worked. And for the last 2 years that we've used it, man, they're like, oh wow, where were we? Where was this all of our life?
Yeah.
So that's what those interop channels are for. By and large, they stay dormant most of the time. They're not used until there's special events, but they're channels that are designated for those special events should we have a problem.
Alrighty. This is on Digital Frequency Search, which is another website. Cottage Grove Volunteer Fire is reported to be using P25 for their mobiles. Is this true?
They used to have a P25 system. They got one of those firefighter assistance grants and got Kenwood P25 radios, and they got a Kenwood P25 repeater. They were not using it in the P25 mode very much, and it was conventional P25. It was not
DMA, just
right. It was just a single mode P25 repeater, and only they could talk on it and that kind of thing. And when, of course, we provided them radios, these radios were free to the fire departments, and we provided the infrastructure that allowed them to sell all their equipment and use it for other things. So they no longer have those P25 radios. They sold those radios. Okay. I think they still have the repeater because they use that repeater in analog mode. We were using that repeater in analog mode at the time to set off the siren, the tornado siren at the Cottage Grove station, and we have since changed that to a repeater up on Grove Hill that can now set off that siren, so we don't have to utilize that repeater, which was hard to connect to from here. The repeater from Grove Hill can just send out a signal. It's not trying to listen. It just sends, and the siren in Cottage Grove can hear it just fine. So we've changed that. So now I think they've even turned that repeater off and are looking to sell it. But yeah, they had a P25 system. But once we gave them free radios and said, this is going to be a better opportunity and better for you, they were all about that. So.
Yeah. Is there a fail-soft feature with the Henry's DMR system?
Well, we went over that. That was the secondary repeaters. We're also implementing, and this is not so much a failover as an interoperability type thing. We are looking at a couple of things, actually 3 things. We're looking at moving the 146, the 14736 machine, which is the used to be a K4KLX repeater. I don't remember what it is. It's one on Grove Hill. The ham repeater up there into a different building. Just move the repeater into a climate controlled building. Right now, it's not in a climate controlled building at all. And so we're talking with the ham radio operators here in Henry County that manage that site to potentially move that over. We got to work out the coax issues and move that into a building that we have recently acquired. It's not our building, but they're letting us use it, and it has heat and air inside of it. The generator's gone, but we have heat and air. Of course, with a repeater like that, it can run on 48 volts, and you can just stick a car battery on it.
Yeah.
We're also looking at moving the repeater that's owned by the Emergency Management Office, which is currently, it's 145, 350 or something like that. It's currently out at the County Highway Department maintenance garage. And we're going to move it to Grove Hill and put it on the tower with our repeater system in our room. We got room on our tower for that one, so it'll be spaced far enough that it shouldn't have so many interference. And then we're looking at building what's called a Let's Talk system. Have you ever heard of those?
No.
Okay, so Let's Talk is a system that's done by the state of Tennessee, and they provide you with the frequencies. They're FEMA interop frequencies. They're called UTNMA, VTNMA, and 8TNMA. And they have different tone codes for each one. There's 0 through 10. So 10 different sets of tone codes that you can have. And they space them all over the state. And what they are is they're patched repeaters. They're UV and 800 patched repeaters. So if you go to a town where there is a Let's Talk system, they'll say, okay, we're on Let's Talk 3. So you would turn to UTMA 3, and then that would be their correct PL tone to talk to the VHF and the 800s using the same system.
Yeah.
So we're looking at putting that in for a interoperability channel as well. So that would be a third failover if we were to lose our DMR Tier 2s.
Alrighty. So I know on your Motorola's you have it like here. I'll just show the camera. It's showing the channel number and then the channel name. But I know on your radios it shows the system name.
Yep, there you go.
And it also shows the channel name as well. So how was that achieved? Is that just through the?
That's part of the programming of the DMR Tier 3. That's part of the programming. When you set up a DMR Tier 3 system in the programming itself, it has to register to a system. So there's no scanning. There's not really any scanning in trunking. When you're in trunking, whatever channel keys up on the radio is what you're going to hear, and there's no priority scan. So you can't like scan another channel because it can't listen to other talk groups. It's not frequencies, they're talk groups. So it doesn't work exactly the same way as the old conventional analog repeaters do. But in the same token, it gives you many more channels you can talk on.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, if we initially we're going to have two systems. We're going to have a city system and a countywide system. And then when the sheriff's department and the police department found out that if we do that, they wouldn't be able to scan each other, listen to each other. No, we just need to have one system. So we had to revamp the whole thing and make one system. And HENRA stands for Henry County Emergency Network Radio Interoperability System.
Okay.
So that's what HENRA means.
Yeah.
So.
Alrighty. So is the county going to start moving from the older XPR line of radios that is being discontinued by Motorola to the new R series?
Yes, by no choice. I mean, the R series is what's coming out. The XPRs, we quit buying XPRs altogether. The only reason we went with the XPRs is because the R7s weren't available when we did the grants. So XPR was all you had. And we bought in such bulk that, you're buying 700 radios.
Yeah.
So we got a discount from Motorola on the radios. We got them at almost half price.
Yeah.
Because they're making their money on the radios. We're buying them in bulk. But when you buy that many radios, they'll sell them to you at a little cheaper rate. But now that these radios are obsolete and going away, we're having to switch to the bigger screen R7. Yeah. So there's the difference in the radios there. But yeah, the R7s are a little bit higher priced. The XPR is $1,250. The R7s are around $1,700 MSRP. The Ions about $3,000. These, however, you can get those for somewhere between $900 and $1,100, depending on where you find them and how new they are.
Yeah.
So they're a cheaper alternative, and believe it or not, the Kenwood has a better vocoder on it, in my opinion, than the Motorola does. The Motorola just doesn't have as good a sound quality and noise canceling as the Kenwood. Kenwood's more robust in that particular world, but I don't have over-the-air programming for Kenwood. I can only program Motorola over the air. So if somebody wanted this radio program, they'd have to take it to Airway Communications, who has our channel frequencies and list, and also has strict instructions not to give that to anybody. So the radios are protected where they cannot be read and somebody download our data on them. We don't want those channels because we are running encrypted channels.
Yeah.
And I'll just be open with you. The sheriff and police were chasing a guy through the woods one night. They chased him for an entire day. And this guy was listening to them on his phone. Somebody was on Broadcastify and put it over a scanner app.
Yeah.
And every time they would go chasing him, this guy would hear where they were at and run from them. It took him all day to catch him. Finally, he just got caught, barreled up into a dead end. He couldn't get out.
Yeah.
And so they caught him, and then they heard themselves on the phone. Well, the sheriff and police said, no more. We're going to encrypt.
We're encrypted.
So we are encrypted on the sheriff, and trust me, I got phone calls. Oh, my Lord. Little old ladies who live by the scanner just could not believe that this was happening. And of course, now these scanners are $800, $900 a piece.
Yeah.
For these DMR Tier 3 trunk tracking scanners, the Unit and SDS 100 200, they're, when you buy the license key and the scanner, you're looking at $900.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of mad people But it's like I told him. I said, "This is not a decision I made. It's not something I can fix for you.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And as much as it's nice to hear the police department, bad people can use it too.
Yeah.
And so that's what's basically happened. Is the bad element started using it, and it led to all that being encrypted.
Yeah.
Whether that remains, I don't know. There may be a day when we go back to an unencrypted system, and there may not. We have encrypted channels, so I mean, we have other channels encrypted. The school system, for instance, all the channels in the school system are encrypted channels.
Yeah.
Except for those talk-arounds that they use at the school. I can't do anything about those. We don't manage those radios nor those frequencies, so I have no control of that. But every radio that I manage that the school systems use, because we're talking about people's children, they're encrypted.
Yeah.
The ambulance to the hospital, where they're giving out patient information, it's encrypted. So those, for HIPAA violations, we can't give out that information. So those are encrypted channels, and that's the way it's got to be.
I find it interesting because Weakley County, I've heard them give out social security numbers and phone numbers on the air, and it's fully unencrypted.
It is, and believe it or not, the CJIS policy from the FBI over those things have been, well, okay, not lax is not the word I'm using. It just never been. It was never cybersecurity threats from taking someone's social security number prior to 10 years ago just did not exist. In the last 10 years, that's when this has really come about, where people have started stealing people's social security numbers and so forth. And so you're still dealing with an element of the way we used to do things in the old days, and that still prevails. Of course, with us being encrypted, it's not so much a problem as it used to be. But even when we did go just DMR and it was open where you could hear it, we didn't typically give back social security numbers on a non-encrypted channel. In fact, the plan was that on traffic stops and or accidents where those information had to be given out, we were going to set up a separate frequency that was encrypted to do those things, to talk to dispatch and say, here's your social, here's your driver's license, and that way it was non-public information.
Yeah.
So that was in the plan. Then we went full encrypted, and it never became. But yeah, there's a lot of departments. I mean, I was a police officer or a sheriff's deputy, reserve deputy, and I gave out somebody's social security number. That's all he had. He didn't know his driver's license number, but he knows the social. Okay, county run this number. I gave it out on the radio. And it never occurred to me. 10 years ago, the thought never crossed my mind that somebody's going to steal this guy's social security number and go open credit cards on him.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have to be thinking about those things now.
Yeah.
People are doing nefarious things, and every day they're getting worse and worse.
Yeah. So this is going into the vehicles and the SWR on the antennas. What SWR do the vehicles in the county have, and is that achieved by someone here in the county, or does a Motorola technician or some sort of a radio technician come out?
No, so the company that sold us the system, they installed every radio in every vehicle, and that was part of the RFP. Not only because the radio vendor wanted it done a certain way and done correctly, but they wanted it to also be under warranty. Part of the RFP that we signed had a warranty clause in it. And so for them to guarantee that warranty, they had to do the install. So every car, every radio in this county was installed either by the company or an approved person by the company, because like the BPU has their own radio guy, but he knows them and he's approved by them. So, and plus they're not in the 5-year warranty. They're not a first responder agency, so they don't qualify for the same thing. But every first responder vehicle in this county that was under the grant, every single radio, every fire truck, every ambulance, every police car was professionally installed by that vendor, so that it met the minimum requirements that they needed for the warranty. So now what the SWRs were and that kind of thing, I don't know the exact numbers. All I do know is that they were in spec. Every one of the antennas was cut perfectly to length. So it wasn't like they just stuck an antenna on and they literally trimmed them with literally a pair of channel locks. They were so big you have to little bitty small channel locks. But yeah, they're cut to frequency. They're tuned and everything.
Alrighty. How are the storm sirens activated? Is that through DTMF, POCSAG, or any other kind of mode?
So what we've done with the sirens is they are still analog radio. We felt that using analog radio was best because digital can cause issues occasionally. So we have a old repeater up on Grove Hill that was our countywide fire repeater, and the sirens were set off by the fire department repeaters at each site. So Buchanan repeaters set off those, Cottage Grove set off theirs. Okay, so what we did was we said, okay, let's take the tone code out of it, and let's put in a specific tone code that's utilized for all the radios in the county on that frequency. So now dispatch back here can literally set off individual sirens based upon which tone code they put in to set off from one repeater to all the sirens in the county. So I can either set off every siren, or I can set off just Buchanan, or I can set off just Cottage Grove, but it's all still analog.
Alrighty. Any future plans for the radio system within the county?
Not currently, other than the AVL project that we're talking about. There's no current upgrades. That's the beautiful thing about these Leonardo repeaters that we bought. The Leonardo system, I could literally change to P25 overnight. I could literally put in a license key and reboot the repeater, and now it's a P25 repeater. I don't have to change hardline, antennas, combiners, nothing. I don't have to change a thing. Just that. That's it.
Straight through.
Straight through. Just change the license key. Then I had to reprogram all the radios.
Yeah.
And then, oh Lord, that takes forever. This AVO project, I'm going to have to literally touch every radio in the county. Well, except for non-first responders. But I'm looking at reprogramming 600 something radios.
Goodness.
You know, and handheld and mobile, and adding information and data to it, firmware upgrades. I mean, this last firmware upgrade we did was especially hard because we went from 10 to 20 on the number, version 10 to version 20, and it took almost an hour to upgrade the radio. Now, once the radio got to 20, when I do an upgrade or an update, man, it just does it in 5 seconds. It's fast. It's like wham. But you know, it doesn't quite go as fast when it was on 10, and we had a lot of impatient people, just to say the least. And believe it or not, there's still some radios out there that are still in version 10 that we either don't know where that radio is because it's been put into a closet in storage because an officer quit or whatever, or it's being currently put into a different vehicle. And once it hits the system, though, once it's turned back on, it'll see the system and it'll go. Now, we've had a couple of stolen radios. We had one radio got lost. We had two go through a chipper. Well, you go down that road. One got run over by a fire truck. But the ones that got stolen, as soon as we know they're stolen, I literally go in there and turn the radio off.
Just kill it through the thing.
I can either kill stun it or turn it out and non-register it. So if it depends how I want to do it. Most of the time, what I do is just non-register it because if they don't have the charger, you know, they're not going to be able to recharge it. And if it's not registered to the system, I don't care what they got on it. It ain't going to ever pick up anything. It's never going to pick up nothing. And they don't have the pass key to get in to reprogram it. So it's basically a brick.
Yeah.
And they can't send it off to Motorola because when I send it to Motorola, I send the serial number of the stolen radio. When it comes to Motorola, they're going to go, oh, there's the radio. So they're going to send it back to me, not to that person. So, you know, it's stun kill is good. Stun kill, I've only had to use stun kill in very certain circumstances where there was somebody that had a radio and we had to, you know, intervene to those people. They were doing something they should be doing, and we had to turn the radio off. But it's never been the funniest one was we had a person, and I won't say what agency or who it was, but we had a person who was riding with their wife in a car one night, and apparently they were having an argument, and he was sitting on his key, and he was transmitting, and they were just throwing curse words like, you know, like sailors. And I got a phone call and said, turn the radio off. So
disable it, please.
Disable the radio. So I literally stun killed the radio. It was I had a really long face when the guy came back to me and said, could you please turn my radio back on? So, yeah, I turned your radio back on. Let's not sit on it anymore. How about that?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's happened, but You know, that's the beauty of this system, where when you were on analog, somebody had a radio, you didn't know who it was. You know, people would sit on their keys all the time. That was the old bird dog days. You remember when you had to rabbit hunt for the signal? But yeah, now I can just turn the radio off and I don't have to worry about it.
Alrighty. What dispatching software is being used in the dispatch room?
The radio software is Zetron. Zetron Max CT. We're on the latest version of the Zetron product. And I'll show you that here in a little bit. But we're using Zetron Max CT, which also blends with our phone system, which is Zetron Max. So the dispatchers then can wear one headset, talk on the radio and the phone at the same time, saving them a lot of power. And plus, we're using AI's gateways. So we're connected directly to the repeaters. So when they key up the radio, they're not talking to a radio in the back room. They're talking directly to Grove Hill, to the repeater through the network. Now, the encrypted radios, because Zetron doesn't support DMR Tier 3 encryption, only P25, we have to use radio control stations that are encrypted to do the encryption. So the sheriff and police are going through control stations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Since the system is being used on simulcast, would a subscriber radio need to be told that it's on simulcast, or does it automatically work just by being on one site?
No, it works like a cell phone. It just roams. The closer to a site it is, it locks into that site automatically. It doesn't know whether it's at Cottage Grove or Grove. It doesn't care. It just sees the signal, because all of them have the same frequency. It just sees the signal, and whatever's the strongest signal is what it gets. Now, we have made it where the signals overlap, right? You know, the power at the tower sites. So when you drive from Grove out 79 North, when you get to just around Lakewood School, the signal from the Grove Tower kind of ends there, and the one for the Rabbit Creek Road comes on there. So you just basically drive into it, and the radio never knows the difference. It thinks it's still connected to Grove, but it's not.
Yeah.
You know, that was the best way of handling it. That way we didn't have to, you didn't have to push a button to change tower sites and, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So we went over how well the Tier 3 system works. And would working with P25 add or remove anything that you already have currently with DMR?
I don't know a whole lot about P25, but I have got a friend who's an engineer with the state, and he said that there are functionality things in DMR Tier 3 that are not available in the P25. I think text messaging was one of them. We can send text messages, the old telephone, flip
the
phone.
keypad.
Yeah, the keypad, the T9 thing. So we actually have some people that have been using that texting feature. And funny story there, one of our water utility departments in the county one day sent a not crude message, but a kind of a silly message, and he didn't designate what radio it was supposed to go to first. So he sent it to all 999 radios. So every radio went off with this text message from this, So we had to call him and say, look, start being careful, because if it continues to be a problem, we're just going to shut it off. So there are features of DMR Tier 3 that are not currently utilized by P25. Of course, P25 is obviously a more standardized system for law enforcement and public safety, and made that way. But we have built I think a very good system. We've worked out a lot of the bugs. There's still going to be problems because encryption adds a layer of not confidentiality is not the word, but it adds a layer of complexity to the signal that's already digital. So it's kind of like making a Xerox of something that's kind of fuzzy, and then layering a mask over the top of it makes it even fuzzier. Same principle, same instance, But by and large, let's put it this way. We did a survey one day of one day's broadcast. There was right at 4,390 radio broadcasts on every talk group and every channel on the system that day, and 14 of them had garble or problems. So 14 out of 4,530 something or whatever it was. I can live with those averages, I can live with that. Somebody can say, could you repeat? Because here's what people forget. In the analog world, we had these problems. We still had static, and we had people who would talk on the radio, and they were just outside, couldn't hear them real good because they were staticky. Could you repeat that traffic? Well, in the digital world, you don't have the static. You're either on the repeater or you're not. You'll pixelate. You'll get that digital signal. Well, they don't equate that to be the same thing as being staticky. They don't equate that in their mind. They think because they got out and it garbled that the system was not working. No, the radio just didn't transmit the packets properly, or something happened there. But that's not meaning that the radio system is not working.
Yeah.
That just means that there was an anomaly that happened with the radio. I mean, the other night, I've got a solar monitor on my phone, and I monitor the solar activity that's going on. So, like right now, we're have an M-class flare going on, and we have an unsettled atmosphere. So, radio communications right now is still okay, but it could be a lot of problems. There could be a lot of problems. Now, the other night when we had the Aurora Borealis, okay, you couldn't hear WTPR from their tower site on East Wood Street at Lakewood School. You couldn't pick up channel WTPR at all.
Yeah.
On 975, and you couldn't hear 1017, which is over in Dover, their tower over there. You couldn't hear it at Lakewood. So in the between, you couldn't hear nothing because there was so much interference from the sun that it was causing radio interference.
Yeah.
Well, it messes with their radios just like mine,
Yeah.
So I'll send messages to the chief, the sheriff, and the EMS director and all them when my monitor goes off and says we're having a bad solar flare or a sunspot or we got a unsettled plasma storm or whatever. When it gets bad, I'll send it out and say, hey, listen, for the next couple of hours at least, radio communications is going to be terrible. Just know that now. That way I don't get phone calls saying, I warned you ahead of time, and there's not a thing I can do about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what people don't understand. There's so many things that can affect signal. And by and large, sunspots makes radio communication terrible. But ham radio operators, when there's no sunspots, you can talk all over the world. Everywhere, man. And that happens every 14 years.
Yeah.
We have solar maximum and minimum every 14 years. So, and this year, 2025, I think it's May of 2025, we will hit the solar maximum. And then we should be on a downward spiral going the other way toward the solar minimum in 14 years.
Yeah.
And so, but luckily, knocking on wood, we haven't had a Carrington level event yet, thankfully, because a Carrington level event would be pretty disastrous. But that last solar storm that we had where we saw the aurora was pretty darn close.
Yeah.
If you don't know the Carrington event, please look it up. It was an event where they had a solar flare that hit the earth, and it was so strong it burnt telegraph wires.
I heard of that.
I mean, it's just, happened in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And it literally was they didn't even record solar activity back then. But if it can burn wires on telephone poles,
imagine what could it do now.
Yeah. Well, those wires back then were a lot less, they were carrying a lot more voltage, and they were a lot less coated than the wires we have now. Yeah. So there's a good possibility it would not burn the wires. But that type of activity still causes electric flux at substations. It causes blackouts. It causes, especially up north where there's less atmosphere. New York experiences blackouts all the time, and some of that is attributed to solar.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, that's all the questions I have for you. Thank you so much.
No problem. Glad to see you.
You go.
You too.
And this is KQ4UNQ 73s, and we'll catch you on the next one.
K4CDH 73, signing off.